Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination. News, newsmakers, talking points. Our big talking point, that horrific terror attack in Australia that has shaken the world. A beach mass shooting that's killed 16 now. Anti-Semitism, Islamic terror, now a global threat. We'll have voices from across the world joining us on that. Also, is the centre now replacing the MNREGA scheme? The Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. We'll find out what the centre is up to there. But let's turn right at the very top to the story that's breaking at the moment. The Goa nightclub fire co-owners, Luthras, who had escaped to Thailand, will now land in Delhi tomorrow. They're being brought back by a CBI team. The Goa police will then take custody of them, but they will be first produced in a Delhi court. The Goa police will seek transit remand and take them to Goa, where, remember, that terrible fire took place when 25 people died. The Goa nightclub fire. The Luthras had escaped from the country within 5 hours of the fire and gone to Phuket in Thailand. Let's get more details on what happens next. Divyesh Singh is joining us. Divyesh, they will be taken eventually to Goa. What exactly are the charges that the Goa police is going to maintain against the Luthras, who are the co-owners here?
Well, Rajdeep, the most important charge that the Luthra brothers have been booked for is culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Section 105 of BNS, and this is the section, along with there are several other sections like endangering life and personal safety of others. There are sections of common intention, there are sections of conspiracy. So these sections have been applied against the Luthra brothers and the 6 others who've already been arrested. There's one more wanted person, that is Surinder Khosla, who was owner of the property, who claimed to be the owner of the property and had rented out this property to the Luthra brothers. So all these people have been made accused. Tomorrow, a team of Goa police will be travelling this evening itself to Delhi, and they'll camp there, while tomorrow a team of CBI officials will bring back Luthra brothers to Delhi. In Delhi, they'll hand over the custody to Goa police. So it is as per Goa police. If Goa police wants to fly back immediately after taking custody, they can come to Goa and then in the morning produce the Luthra brothers in court. But if not, they'll have to seek, if they take some more time, they'll have to produce them in a Delhi court, seek a transit remand, then they'll be brought to Goa, and within 24 hours, they'll be produced in court.
Well, it's interesting, Divyesh, that while the Luthra brothers will be then brought to Goa, none of the politicians who allegedly gave them all those illegal licenses, as it turns out, none of them have been booked so far. So we'll wait and see what happens next in this case and what the Luthra brothers have to say about their ownership and just how they managed to get away with running a nightclub on a salt pan land. Divyesh Singh, with those details, I appreciate you joining me here at the top of the news. Okay, let's turn to our top story tonight. The aftermath of that horrific terror attack that took place at Sydney's iconic Bondi beach in Australia. At least 16 people are now dead, with several others still battling from injuries. A mass shooting of a kind that Australia certainly has not seen in a long time. The prime suspects, the attackers, both of Pakistani origin, a father-son duo. And also a story that's now emerging of just how their links are emerging with the Islamic State. All of which suggests that terror now is has a global dimension when it comes to anti-Semitism, particularly after October 7th, 2023. That's our top focus on the news today. Take a look.
Over 15 dead, 40 injured. Australia is in shock after the worst terror attack on its soil in 3 decades. On Sunday, two gunmen opened fire on people who had gathered to celebrate the first day of Jewish Hanukkah holiday on Bondi beach in Sydney. The two shooters were later identified as 24-year-old Naveed Akram and his 50-year-old father Sajid Akram. While Sajid was killed on the spot, Naveed is in critical condition. While the shooting went on, a bystander emerged as a hero. Ahmed Al-Ahmed tackled one of the shooters from behind, cutting short his shooting frenzy, potentially saving many lives. Ahmed, who is of Syrian origin and runs a fruit stall, was there to meet a friend. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called the terror strike an attack on every Australian.
There is no place for this hate, violence and terrorism in our nation. Let me be clear, we will eradicate it. Amidst this vile act of violence and hate will emerge a moment of national unity where Australians across the board will embrace their fellow Australians of Jewish faith at this dark moment for our nation.
World leaders condemned the terror attack.
Likewise in Australia, as you know, there was a terrible attack, 11 dead, 29 badly wounded. And that was an anti-Semitic attack, obviously. And I just want to pay my respects to everybody. I just want to pay my respects to the families. We also had 3 injured, but 2 of them are already out of the hospital and one's going to be okay.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused the Australian government of not acting sternly on anti-Semitism.
On August 17th, about 4 months ago, I sent Prime Minister Albanese of Australia a letter in which I gave him warning that the Australian government's policy was promoting and encouraging anti-Semitism in Australia.
Soon after the terror attack, people queued in front of the blood bank for hours to support hospital dealing with an influx of patients from the Bondi beach shooting. On Monday, citizens held vigils across Sydney in memory of the victims. Bureau Report, India Today.
The horrific terror attack at Sydney's Bondi Beach, which has shocked the world. My first guest is from Sydney. Erin Molan is a leading Australian news television broadcaster. She runs her own show, the Erin Molan Show. Appreciate your joining us there, Erin. What are the latest you're hearing on that attack? It's 24 hours now. We are told an Islamic State link is emerging with the Pakistani father-son duo Sajid Naveed Akram being linked to the Islamic State.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's come to light recently. And we've also discovered that the son in particular was being investigated 4 or 5 years ago for links as well to unsavory behavior, if you put it that way. It's been a very harrowing 24 hours, particularly for the eastern suburbs community here in Sydney and the Jewish community. And I'm not Jewish myself. I've chose to stand alongside them like most normal, decent people should have after October 7, and to condemn the terrorism that not only impacts their lives, but the lives of so many in the Middle East. And it's an ideology now that exists all over the Western world, and you in India have seen this terrorism firsthand as well. And I look at my country, a country that has not had a mass shooting in decades. We had one in Tasmania under the Prime Ministership of John Howard, arguably our greatest Prime Minister, and he clamped down hard on gun laws. And we have been spoilt for decades without something like this. Can I say that I'm surprised? No, that would be a lie. I'm not surprised. I'm shocked, I'm horrified, I'm terrified, to be honest. I've chosen to be a very public face to fight this kind of terrorism, not just on behalf of the Jewish community here in Australia, but on behalf of every decent Australian, which includes a large Indian population who have come to this country, embraced our way of life, maintained their own incredible culture and religion, but bought into what we believe and what we value. Yet we have people who have come to this country who feel the exact opposite. They've come here to destroy who we are and what we stand for. And it's a moment that was coming and has been coming for 2 years now. No one should be surprised.
But do we know anything more about the father-son duo who are behind this attack, Erin, their background? The son, as you said, was already being investigated, but they seem to escape the radar. Was there no serious attempt made by the Australian police over these years to find out potential links of people like the Akrams with Islamic State? Because questions are now being raised over policing policies in Australia and indeed immigration laws.
Absolutely. And look, there have been well prior to this, and there have been 2 or 3 press conferences with, the Minister, the Head of Home Affairs, also with the Chief of Police, also with the Prime Minister, and they're very cagey on this, and they are being asked. They're being asked multiple questions. They're being pushed on certain points. What we do know is that there are links to Islamic State. We don't know the extent of those links. We were told that the son was investigated 4 or 5 years ago by ASIO, but we're told that was because he was in proximity to other people as opposed to activity himself. But you tell me, even if someone is on your radar, even if it might just be a little thing here or there, nothing overly concrete, would you allow them to have a gun license and have 6 firearms? I mean, it's insanity. There are countries in the Middle East who deal with terrorism on a daily basis and have zero tolerance for any of it. Zero tolerance. Yet in Australia, we have this suicidal empathy where we let people into our country who don't share our values. And that's putting it politely. We're letting people into our country who want to kill us.
Do you think then, Erin, that this is a bit of a wake-up call? Australia prides itself on being a very open society. Are Australians shocked and enraged that terror has hit Bondi Beach of all places? Will this lead to a tightening of immigration policies, a relook at some of those gun control laws?
I think it has to lead to change, because I don't think we survive without change. I think moments like this, they force a country to look at itself, to really look at itself and determine who we are and what we stand for. And we've had issues with immigration when it comes to logistics. We don't have enough houses. We don't have enough, industry, looking at facilities and services. This is on a whole new level. A whole new level. I think it will. There's already talk about gun law changes, but we already have really tight gun laws. What we need to do, and what's needed to happen since October 7, you look at what happened on that day, and this is when this rot and this decay really began in this country. 2 days later, outside the Opera House, we had people in this country, my country, our incredible nation, celebrate the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. We had people chanting, "Gas the Jews, F the Jews, where are the Jews?" Did one of those people pay a price? And that wasn't free speech, that was hate speech. Did one of those people pay a price? No. Did the silent majority in my country stand up and say, "Not on our watch"? No. Did our Prime Minister stand up and say, "Not under my leadership"? No. We failed miserably. And then we saw an escalation at every corner. We saw synagogues firebombed. We saw cars set alight outside Jewish homes. We saw schools attacked, Jewish schools. We saw Jewish people attacked in the streets. We saw graffiti with slurs. We had hundreds of thousands of people march across our harbour bridge, images broadcast around the world, holding up Taliban flags, Hamas flags, chanting "Death to the Jews." Where was the silent majority in my country that is meant to find that abhorrent? They were silent. Where were our leaders? Completely silent. They were too busy placating sections of society that they thought they needed to suck up to win elections. Their job is to keep us safe, and they have failed. And it's not just this government. Immigration in this country has been flawed in recent times. It used to be amazing. We've had the most incredible people come to Australia. Diversity is the fabric of who we are. We've had incredible Indian Australians, Italian Australians, Chinese Australians come in who share our values and are grateful for the opportunity. But we've got to stop letting people in, i.e. thousands of people from Gaza we let into this country after October 7 to try and look like we were good people. Well, I'm sorry, but you need to care more about the lives of the people in this country than you do about looking good on the world stage to appeasing the leftist side of your party. So I think it will lead to significant change because it has to.
And yet, Erin, and you know, I share your anguish, and yet one of the heroes of what happened is Ahmed al-Ahmed, Syrian origin, disarmed very bravely one of the attackers. And therefore, the concern is that what happened in Australia, will it become about a specific religion? Or will it be seen that heroes and villains exist in every community? Is there an acknowledgement in Australia that for every Akram family, there's Ahmed al-Ahmed who risked his life to disarm the attackers? One engaged in unacceptable terrorism, Islamic terrorism, and Ahmed al-Ahmed, who is a total hero.
I love this so much. And this has been the basis of my argument since October 7. Has been Islamic extremism hurts Muslims more than it hurts anyone else. I grew up in Indonesia, the world's largest Islamic nation. I was raised in part by devout Muslim women who are like family to me. I go back to that country twice a year. I fight for Muslim kids as much as I fight for anyone else, and they hate this extremism as much as anyone else. And one thing I've been saying is we need more Muslim voices to condemn the extremism. And I know that's hard. I know that's hard in certain places. You can't say it at all. But in Australia, we have incredible Muslims, and we got to see one of the greatest in action today. And I love that. I think it's such a powerful story. And you're exactly right. It should never be about religion. Evil exists in every corner of society, in every religion, in every race, in every ethnicity. But we need to stamp out the kind of ideology that encourages it and that breeds it. And that is our issue here. But this man is a hero. He's incredible. And he is what Australia is about. He is the kind of person that comes to this country and will give his life, because he could have died. There is every chance. Not only did he tackle a man with a gun, he knew there was another bloke with a gun on a bridge that was about to turn his attention to him. That is impossible to fathom. He is a hero, and absolutely Australians are not racist. We're not bigoted. We deeply appreciated that, and he is being celebrated as he should be.
You know, in conclusion, as you've said, Karen, there's been a wave of anti-Semitism we've witnessed across the world, in Australia, that's gone unchecked. Will we now see a rising Islamophobia, and will that prove equally dangerous? Is that a real concern, a fear?
Look, it feels like every time there is an incident like this, people come out and start to talk about Islamophobia. There is no equivalence between the two, in my opinion, in Australia, and I say that as someone who speaks the language of the world's largest Islamic nation and cares deeply about Muslims. I don't think there is any equivalence at all. But any hate aimed at any group based on which God they pray to is unacceptable. Any hate. I don't care who or what it is, but what I would say to you at this stage, I think the focus needs to be on the victims there and on stamping it out entirely.
Erin, you know, you've spoken through your heart, and you've made very strong points. It's been a pleasure talking to you there in Sydney. Thank you so much for joining us. What's been a very difficult 24 hours for the people of Sydney and Australia. Our thoughts and prayers with all the victims' families. Thank you so much for joining me here on India Today.
Thank you so much for having me, and you do a phenomenal show. I was looking at it earlier, and you're brilliant. So thank you. It's a real honour to be on your show. Thank you so much.
So after the awful happenings at Australia's iconic Bondi Beach, the big question is anti-Semitism, Islamic terror, now the new global threat in the war against terror. Joining me now, Gideon Falter, Chief Executive Campaign Against Anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom, Professor Rohan Gunaratna, Professor of Security Studies at Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, Editor of the Handbook of Terrorism in Asia Pacific. Dr. Soumya Avasthi is a Fellow at the Center for Strategy, Security and Technology at the Observer Research Foundation. And Jitarth Jai Bhardwaj is Founder and Editor-in-Chief at the Australia Today. Appreciate all of you joining us. I want to come to you, Gideon, first, because what we've seen in recent times is a pattern of terror attacks directed at Jewish communities in some parts of the world. And many see it as a fallout also what has been happening in Gaza over the last 24 months. How do you read what you saw happening in Sydney? Is there a pattern that is emerging?
There's absolutely a pattern, and many people will be familiar, of course, with the horrific attack that happened against a Chabad community in Mumbai all those years ago. And for the British Jewish community, there's the very recent memory of the killings in Manchester at a synagogue on Yom Kippur this year. And now, of course, we are seeing this same macabre pattern play out yet again as we see the brutality meted out by Islamist thugs, cowardly thugs, in Sydney against a Jewish community celebrating Hanukkah. And unfortunately, this is a form of terrorism which Israelis are well familiar with. It is a form of terrorism which Indians are well familiar with. But it is a form of terrorism which many in the West, although they've had so many examples of these killings, are still not awake to. And what we're seeing now, I think, is yet again Western politicians failing to understand what they need to do about this because they're offering thoughts and prayers. They're saying that they must not allow this kind of thing to happen, but they're not giving any specifics about what exactly they're going to do to make sure that we don't keep waking up to breaking news and screens filled with barbaric images.
Can I just push you on this? Do you link it to what happened in Gaza? The general belief that thousands of innocent women and children were killed in Gaza, retaliation, of course, to the terrible attack that Hamas undertook in Israel itself. Is that the cycle of violence?
No, there's no cycle of violence because the Jews of Sydney had not done anything in anybody's accusations. But this is exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing now a world in which people in the media, but also people on social media, are obsessing about Jews constantly and obsessing about Israel. And they say that Israel, the Jewish state, the one Jewish state in the world, is uniquely evil, that anybody who is Jewish is therefore tainted by this evil and deserves to be murdered. And for anybody who is out there saying that something that happened in Gaza legitimizes thousands of miles away a 10-year-old girl, a young rabbi, father of five, a Holocaust survivor in the late years of their lives, being murdered in cold blood as they celebrate Hanukkah, not only is such a person sick and deranged, but also such a person is basically propagating Hamas ideology, which says that, and this is the same Islamist ideology used by Islamic State and other Islamist terrorist organizations around the world, which say that Jews deserve to die because they are uniquely evil. And they always find some excuse. If there hadn't been the October 7th atrocity perpetrated by Hamas, there wouldn't have been the war that ensued. And without that war, they would have found some other excuse. Jews have been murdered in cold blood all over the West since long before October 7th. So let's not lose sight of the fact that this is ingrained in Islamist ideology, that Jews need to die, that the West needs to suffer constant barbarity and violence. And anybody trying to make this about something that happened in Gaza is deranged and sick and propagating Hamas ideology.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, therefore, picking up from what we heard from Gideon, the elephant in the room is Islamic terror, Islamic radicalization. And we are seeing it manifest here in Australia. There is evidence that both these individuals of father, son of Pakistani origin had some links with Islamic State, or at least certainly supported the broader Islamic State ideology. Are we seeing it now acquiring an even more ominous dimension? Because here you have two individuals, they've got their guns and they can go and shoot recklessly in Bondi Beach, relatively an area where you have thousands of tourists, and therefore this kind of mass shooting makes it even more difficult to actually deal with rising Islamic radicalization of the kind we're seeing play out there in Australia.
Based on the investigation conducted by the Australian security and intelligence community, Naveed Akram was a member of the Islamic State. In fact, His associate was arrested in 2019, and he's still continuing his time in prison. But what is important to understand is that Naveed Akram was known to the security and intelligence community for his support for ISIS or the Islamic State. Of course, he radicalized his father, 50-year-old Sajid Akram. Now, what we need to understand is that there are three things happening. One is that the Muslim community in Australia needs to be better integrated to the Australian host community. Second is that we saw the wave of Al Qaeda terrorism, the wave of ISIS terrorism, and now we are seeing a third wave of terrorism that is radicalizing the Muslim community. So it is important not to bring the conflicts that are happening in the Middle East into Australia. I have always argued that even in India and in Sri Lanka, in the Maldives, we should not bring what is happening in the Middle East to our own countries and radicalize our communities. Third is, of course, the security and intelligence services should work very closely with each other. India issued a threat warning that there will be attacks against the Jewish targets on Sunday morning, that is December 14th. And that threat warning was shared with a number of countries. I commend India's security and intelligence community for issuing that warning. And I believe that when there are such high profile events, such as the Festival of the Lights the Jews celebrated, they should have had more security there. There should have been greater alertness and vigilance, and of course, law enforcement officers patrolling that wing.
Can I just ask you for a moment, because you've done a lot of work on Al Qaeda. We saw the Bali bombings several years ago when the Al Qaeda was spreading its tentacles across the world. How different is this latest threat to Al Qaeda? Is it in many ways far more dangerous, perhaps because it could happen anywhere, anytime, with individuals? You don't even need a group anymore.
You are absolutely correct. The Al-Qaeda linked Jamaat Islamiyah staged the Bali attack. 202 people were killed in October 2002, of which 88 were Australians. In fact, that was the biggest loss the Australians suffered. This is what is called a terrorist cell or a terrorist network. It's not by a terrorist group, although they derive the ideology of ISIS or the Islamic State. So what is important to understand is today the groups have fragmented into cells and networks and individuals, lone wolves. So there must be a greater orientation, alertness to detect, to prevent these attacks, because every attack is preceded by 14 indicators: propaganda, fundraising, procurement of weapons, safe houses, vehicles, transportation. All those indicators were seen in the Bondi beach attack. So law enforcement agencies should work very closely with the community to prevent these attacks. Otherwise, these attacks will become the standard modus operandi of attacks that we will witness in the coming months and coming years.
Dr. Soumya Awasthi, the fact is both the main attackers have been found to be, the two main attackers have been found to be of Pakistani origin, which again brings Pakistan back into the focus as being seen as an epicenter of terror and really been the hub in many ways of this new Islamic State ideology that's spreading its tentacles across the world. How troubling should that be seen, as earlier we've had groups like Jaish and Lashkar, but now you have these lone wolves, so you have smaller terror cells operating not just directed at India, but across the world, emanating out of Pakistan in many ways.
Yes, so I agree with Professor Rohan here, and also I wanted to add that terrorism is no more a event which takes place in closed door. It has become a hydra monster. So there are multiple places where you find this emerging threat, and it's no more restricted to any state which has been very inclusive in society. So we saw the similar kind of act in New Zealand. We saw attack on the Jewish community in India in the Taj attack, and we see constant attack on the Jewish community. And the reason behind it is that this whole radicalization is religious in nature. It's no more people who argue that it's political, social. It's not limited to that, but it definitely has a religious nature. When you talk about the kind of sermons that are given to people to radicalize them, you will often hear them talk about Palestine, talk about Gaza, talk about Al Qaeda's mission. So it's somebody who is highlighting these points is not to support the or propagate the idea of Gaza, but also to highlight that these are very genuine reasons that you keep finding attack on religious backgrounds, on religious notions. And coming to what
Right.
we keep seeing in India, yes, Pakistan's involvement is no more a hidden story. It's everybody knows, whether it is Osama's presence or present when Jaish-e-Mohammed is carrying out the procession of the martyrs, so-called martyrs from their camp, and being attended by the ISI. Secondly, they asking for funding digitally is again something which tells that they are openly
Right.
talking issues, and cyber has to play a bigger role in this, and it definitely does. The online radicalization programs that are running through online social media, through gaming applications, through betting apps, you name it and they have it. So they have it in all forms and shapes now, so you can't really say it's of a particular kind, but it's a combination of multiple issues together which brings this in front of us. And
Right.
no state
Jitar,
can be secured from this.
Jitar Jai Bhardwaj, your editor-in-chief in Australia today. Australia has shown itself in recent times to be an open society in terms of welcoming migrants. In recent times, we've seen a bit of a backlash, but over the years, Australia was seen as having become far more open, particularly to Asian communities. Do you believe what has happened, this terror attack, will now make the Australian authorities, as I asked my Australian journalist earlier in the show, a little bit more cautious now about having tougher gun control laws, but also being tough on immigration?
See, I can't say that immigration will be tightened because of this incident, but definitely the Prime Minister of Australia have a signal that gun control laws will be changed in near future. He's talking to the state and territory attorney generals, and a proposal will be ready as soon as in 2 weeks' time. Right now, any permanent resident who is not citizen of Australia can own a gun with a license. Of course, we don't have a gun culture. Only in certain cases guns are allowed. Either you are in rural community where you need gun for animal control or something, or you are in sporting community. And this gentleman was in sporting community. That's why he had 6 gun licenses. Second thing, yes, there'll be incidents. I mean, what I am seeing is that people who look like me, and the attacker also looked like me. So there will be certain incident in coming weeks, months, or days. We don't know for that. There is anger in Australian community, and I can understand that anger. 15 innocent people are dead right now, and this man, he is responsible just because of his religious hate. He has done that.
Right.
One more point I have to correct, Rajdeep,
But
which is we are not confirmed about the origin of these attackers as of now. So Australian government, any authority has not confirmed where they come from.
it's interesting that you're saying that, because all the reports, of course, clearly suggest that they are of Pakistani origin, at least the reports that I have with me. But Gideon Falter, one of the interesting aspects of this is that one of the heroes, in a way, of what happened was Ahmed Al-Ahmad, a fruit seller, who actually disarmed one of the attackers. He is reportedly of Syrian origin. In a sense, the worry, of course, with attacks like that, it leads to growing Islamophobia. So you've got anti-Semitism growing, but you've also got Islamophobia and the demonization of an entire community. But one of the heroes was the 43-year-old man who snatched the gun away. How do you see that? How do you deal with anti-Semitism on one side growing and Islamophobia growing on the other?
Well, they're very different things, and obviously the hero in this story who did disarm the attacker. Of course, when these terrible things happen, often what happens is that you get a lot of people standing around and filming. This is somebody who decided that he was going to act. He didn't stand around and film. He went straight in. He was able to grab one of the gunmen from behind, one of the terrorists. He was able to take his gun from him, and he was able effectively to disarm him. And thankfully, he's making a recovery, as we understand it, in hospital. The reality is that Islamist extremism has been on the rise right across the world, as some of your other contributors have said. And one of the principal fixations and obsessions of Islamists is killing Jews. And so a large part of Islamist operational military effort is engaged in trying to kill Jews. A large part of their propaganda effort is engaged in trying to get people to obsess about Jews, to think, for example, that Israel is on some kind of genocidal rampage and that Jews are somehow all behind it. So anti-Semitism is a very complex hatred which is driven in large part by Islamist ideology, along with extreme left ideology and extreme right ideology. And in certain places, such as in the United States, you're now starting to see that there are people like Candace Owens, who originally were considered to be of the right wing, who have now become what they call the woke right, where they also are spouting the most outrageous anti-Semitic libels, trying to persuade people to hate Jews. And then, of course, you've got people who are of the left, who are allying increasingly with Islamists in this particularly unlikely alliance, to try to drive hatred against Jews as well. And that's where you get the kind of environment where after Sydney, what we're hearing is people saying, Jews deserve this. You know, someone saying that is basically no better than the kind of Islamist extremist who commits this kind of attack.
I couldn't agree with you more. That is, if anyone says that Jews deserve this, it is a form of hate speech that's purely repugnant, and these kind of violent attacks actually only end up putting Muslims across the world in a way in the dock, and therefore these individuals who claim to stand by Islamic religion are actually doing the greatest damage to Islam that anyone can really do. I appreciate my guests joining me here on the news today. Thank you all very much from different parts of the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, to our top political story, Nitin Nabin has taken charge as the working president of the Bharatiya Janata Party. The Bihar minister reached Delhi on Monday, where he got a grand welcome at the party headquarters, greeted by Home Minister Amit Shah and party chief JP Nadda. Now, Nabin's choice has raised a lot of eyebrows. Most people had not even heard of him outside of Bihar. But the 45-year-old's rise could well mark yet another generational change in the BJP under the Modi-Shah regime. Take a look.
The BJP has a new working president. Bihar Minister Nitin Nabin has taken charge as the party's national working president. The timing is significant. The appointment comes just months ahead of crucial state elections, as the BJP looks to fine-tune its political strategy and strengthen its electoral machinery on the ground. From student politics to the Bihar cabinet, Nitin Nabin's ascent within the BJP has been steady, marked by a strong grassroots connect and organizational discipline. He has been a member of the Bihar Legislative Assembly since 2006. In 2008, he was inducted into the National Executive Committee of the Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha. 2 years later, in 2010, he was elevated as National General Secretary of the Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha. In 2019, he took charge as a state president of the Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha. Earlier, in 2024, he was entrusted with the responsibility of BJP in charge for Chhattisgarh, reflecting the party's confidence in his organizational abilities. The BJP went on to dislodge the Bhupesh Baghel government.
पार्टी ने एक विश्वास किया, कार्यकर्ताओं ने काम सिखाया, नेताओं ने मार्गदर्शन किया और यही कारण है कि आज पिताजी के उस आशीर्वाद के बल पर 20 वर्ष बाद पार्टी आज यहाँ पहुँचाई। राजनीति धैर्य का काम है, धैर्य के साथ निरंतर काम करते रहिए, सफलता मिलती है।
As the BJP gears up for high-stakes electoral battles, the role of the working president becomes pivotal, overseeing coordination, campaign management, and booth-level mobilization across states.
He is very dedicated. He is very committed. He is experienced as a 5-time MLA, low profile, but dedicated for the party. Has assigned so many responsibilities. This can happen only in BJP. That is simple, humble worker, very experienced, very dedicated, can be elevated as the party president.
The opposition played down Nabeen's appointment. The Congress has questioned the BJP's internal democratic processes, alleging that leadership appointments lack transparency.
There's a clear lack of process in the recent announcement of the BJP for their national working president. And there's a clear lack of meaningful engagement and dialogue with their party workers.
With his elevation to the post of working president, Nabeen could become the party chief at some point. Bureau Report, India Today.
Okay, let's turn to the other big story today, which is coming from Parliament, where the Union government is set to introduce a bill in the Lok Sabha that proposes a sweeping overhaul of India's rural employment framework. The bill, circulated among the MPs and likely to be introduced in the next few days, seeks to repeal the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, MNREGA, and replace it with a new law. The proposed legislation is titled the Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission Gramin, a real tongue twister. A key provision of the bill is a statutory guarantee of 125 days of wage employment every financial year for each household willing to undertake unskilled manual work. Earlier it was 100 days. But the real contentious issue, apart from the name change, is the fact that it slashes central funding for the scheme. If the bill is now passed, only 60% will be funded by the centre. The remaining 40% will have to be borne by the state. So are we seeing the end of MNREGA? And what does that mean? That's our other talking point.
आप सोचिए कितने ऑफिस हैं, कितनी स्टेशनरी है, कितनी उसके एलिमेंट्स हैं जिसमें खर्चा होता है। तो इसका फायदा क्या है, इसलिए किया जा रहा है। महात्मा गांधी जी का नाम क्यों हटा रहे हैं? महात्मा गांधी जी तो इस देश के मतलब सबसे बड़े नेता इतिहास में, दुनिया में, विश्व में माने जाते हैं। तो उनका नाम हटाने के लिए मुझे समझ में ही नहीं आ रहा कि मकसद क्या है, इनकी मंशा क्या है। सदन चल नहीं रहा है, फालतू में हम डिस्कशन भी कर रहे हैं तो पता नहीं कैसी कैसी चीज़ों पे कर रहे हैं, जो असली समस्याएं हैं उन पे कर नहीं रहे हैं। समय व्यर्थ होते जा रहा है, पैसे व्यर्थ होते जा रहे हैं, देश की संपत्ति जो इस सदन को चलाने के लिए है, कुछ ना हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, ये खुद डिस्टर्ब कर रहे हैं, समझ में नहीं आ रहा।
So is this the end of the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme that many believe was one of the game-changing schemes of recent times? Or is it simply a name change, with Mahatma Gandhi being replaced by the VBG Ramji Bill, as it's now being called, Viksit Bharat Guarantee for Rozgar and Ajivika Mission? Joining me now is Reetika Khera, professor at IIT Delhi. She's been involved right from the inception of MNREGA, looked at the scheme very closely. You've now suggested, Reetika Khera, that this is the end of MNREGA. The government says we are improving this bill that we are going to introduce in Parliament. It's already creating a political controversy. Why are you saying that this bill which will be introduced will mark the end of MNREGA, when the government is saying we are guaranteeing 125 days of work, not just 100, but 125 days of work?
Right. So actually, it says in the act, this bill, that they will repeal MNREGA, and the promise, so-called promise of 125 days. It's not really like MNREGA, because one, they say 125 days. Two, they say the sharing ratio will be 60-40. So the center will pay 40%.
Between the center and the states.
Right. And but there is something called a normative allocation that they are saying they will make. So the central government will make a normative allocation to all the states. But whether this normative allocation will be enough to guarantee for 125 days with only a 40% contribution, that is not guaranteed in the act. They say very clearly that it will be based on some objective criteria. So if the government, central government,
your main concern, correct? No, 1 minute. Your main concern is that as the scheme stood today, 100 days was guaranteed work, which the center would fund. Now it's a 60-40 ratio between center and states, and you're not sure whether that fiscal burden that will be borne by the states will be enough to guarantee 125 days of work. Am I correct?
No, so they are not guaranteeing that the money, that the center's contribution will be enough for 125 days. And that is the very least that one would have liked to see in the act. And so if the money given by the center is not enough, even with the lower contribution of the center, to guarantee 125 days, how can the center impose this kind of obligation on the state? And why would the state, in fact, implement it? In the NREGA scheme, in the NREGA Act, the reason that it worked is because the center would give the full funding if the state implemented it. And if the state failed to implement it, then they would have to carry the cost of the unemployment allowance. Now they will have to carry the cost of implementation at a higher rate, for which it is not guaranteed whether they will even get enough at 40% contribution from the center. So in the end, there is no guarantee from the center. It is only putting legal obligations on the states without, as we know, the states don't have enough resources anyway.
But you would agree that there have been concerns over MNREGA, over whether some of the assets that have been built, whether they are, the need for permanent assets, not just for non-manual work. You need to create permanent assets. Surely there is a need, therefore, for improvement. It's not as if a bill should remain the same or an act should remain the same in perpetuity. It's more the financial model that's been brought in. Forget about the controversy over why Mahatma Gandhi's name is being removed. That's a political controversy. But you're more concerned about how the finances are going to operate and whether this will eventually lead to center saying we can't now pay for 125 days guaranteed work.
Right. So they not only have they reduced their obligation, even at the reduced obligation is not guaranteed. And in fact, the point you made earlier is very important. For the longest time, we have been asking for improvements, corrections in NREGA. See, you have to remember that the act was passed unanimously in 2005. The BJP also signed on to it. So when the act is unanimous, even though you must review it, surely it should be done in a more consultative manner. And that is one part of the problem, is that there has been no consultation on what are the changes that are required, certainly not amongst the people that we are aware of, amongst the development economists. Hundreds of papers have been written, but no one seems to have been asked about how we should tinker or improve the existing act. So, of course, even with the assets,
what is the one improvement you would like? What is the one improvement that you would have liked to see in the existing act?
Right. Okay. So just one quick word on the assets, since you brought it up. In fact, the studies that exist, the rigorous studies that exist on the asset creation, they are actually far more positive than we imagine, mango plantations, fish ponds, NREGA wells that have allowed the farmers to cultivate some extra vegetables around the well that has been dug and so on. And if you ask me what was the one improvement I would have liked to see in the act is to rethink all the centralization that is happening through excessive digitization of this program. It started in UPA 2 with imposition of Aadhaar, and that has become such a mess now. It's a real tangled web of all kinds of digitization, and people are running from pillar to post to get work. Once they get work, to be paid, and once their payments are sanctioned, actually to withdraw the money. So those kinds of improvements were very much required and needed. Even those needed consultations. But this has come completely out of the blue, and it is actually mainly seems to be targeted at withdrawing the guarantee. In fact, there is a clause which says that it for 60 days in the year, the act will not be operational. So for those 60 days, it is a guarantee to not give employment.
Right. I just want to put one caveat. There is a strong possibility that the bill will be sent to a select committee for further review. It is very likely that that will happen. Yes, it's likely to be introduced in Parliament. It's been cleared by the Cabinet, but it could be sent to a select committee. So hopefully some of the concerns that you and others have will be addressed by that select committee. And therefore, even if there is a revised new scheme, hopefully it will be in the interest of India's rural poor. Reetika, Khera, for joining me here on the News Today with your concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all that we could pack in on the show tonight, but I want to leave you with our image of the day. The one and only Lionel Messi is now in the national capital to complete his 4-day GOAT tour, the greatest of all time. The football magician interacting with some kids, Delhi's Chief Minister Rekha Gupta, ICC President Jai Shah, DDCA President Rohan Jaitley among the VVIPs who met Messi, Luis Suarez and Rodrigo de Silva. We hope that in future, more Aam Aadmi will also get to meet him, not just the Khas Aadmis. Thanks very much for watching. Stay well, stay safe. Good night, Shubhratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar.